Okay.
Just keep going.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Got to get a good intro. Let's make a starter. I have gotten requests from literally one of you on how, asking how to make a starter. So I thought, oh, okay, I'll show you guys how to make a starter. It's so easy, and the biggest thing to remember and think about when you're making a starter is to just relax and let nature take its course. It's very easy. Don't get hung up on proportions. There's just some kind of basic guidelines, and if you follow those guidelines, you're going to have a very healthy starter, and life is going to be good. So that's what I'm going to show you in this short video. Here is the starter that I have going right now. You can see that I call this a very active starter. Lots of bubbles going on down here. If you look at the surface, lots of bubbles have come up, and it's very bumpy because there's a lot of activity going on and giving it a good smell. It's kind of, how do you describe that? Funky, but in a good way. So this is good stuff. And so this is the starter I have going on. My starter is named Pat. I take very good care of Pat. I keep Pat in a nice container, and I feed Pat twice a day when I'm actively baking. So this is how I'm going to show you how to make a starter and do the same thing that I do. So what you want is some sort of container that you can put a lid on. This is not my ideal container, but I broke the last one that I have my starter in, and so I'm kind of down to the last things that I have. So I need to actually buy a better container. But you want a lid. That's definitely something you want. For the purposes of me showing you how to make this, I'm going to do this in a bowl just to demonstrate. But again, you want a lid. If you don't have a lid, saran wrap, will work. Anything to kind of fairly tightly cover your bowl. And then basically, you're just portioning out flour and water, and then you're letting the bacteria that naturally occurs in the air. You're just letting it interact with everything in the all the stuff that's in the flour, whatever it reacts with. You're just letting it do its thing. You don't have to do anything else. So here are the basic proportions I go for. And again, don't get too hung up on getting exactly the right amount of one thing or another. You're kind of just shooting for a general consistency. So I grab about a cup of flour, and I dump it in there. And then I do about 3/4 of a cup of water. And there we go. And that might even be a little too much, so I may have to, let's find out. So, because honestly, I eyeball this. I eyeball it every time. But what you're looking for is just kind of a drier, on the dry side, ball of dough. Now this is about right. There we go. Give it a little bit of a mix. You could even afford for it to be just a tiny bit drier. But yeah, there we go. That's what you're looking for right there. That's it. That is literally it. This is the beginning of your new starter. And what you're going to do now is you're going to cap it off and let it set for about 12 hours. So how I do that is in the evening, I feed my starter, and then in the morning, I feed it again. So morning and evening. So this is for your first time, right? You have put your flour and water in here, and this is your first time, and then you're going to come back after 12 hours. You're not going to see much activity. That's totally fine. It's going to take you about a week, 10 days to really get what we would probably consider being an active starter. It takes a while to get that bacteria really charged and going. So don't get concerned if you don't see a lot of activity and it doesn't necessarily look like this does immediately, because it definitely won't. It's going to take a little bit of a while. If it seems sluggish, just be patient. Keep feeding it, and it'll be okay. So let's talk about feeding. So you've made your first batch of starter. And now you need to feed it. So this is where we can switch over to the one I have already. Regardless of the age of your starter, regardless of how active your starter is, feeding it is always the same. What you're going to do is you're going to discard almost all of it. So I go ahead and get my spoon in here, and I leave, and I just take a big scoop and I throw it away. Now when I'm consistently baking, of course I don't throw away the starter, I use that starter. But if you don't have anything you're baking, you just you go ahead and discard it. And it's all right. It feels a little weird discarding, you know, what's effectively good flour and water, but you need to. So when I was just starting out making sourdough, I couldn't handle the fact that I was discarding it all the time. I was like, you know, I obviously know better than these people who are teaching me how to do this. I'm going to save it, and I'm just going to keep building and building and building. Well, the problem with that is your bacteria balances get off, and then the next thing you know, you end up with this very rancid mix of, it smells like rubbing alcohol. It's awful, and you can't use it, and you have to throw it away and start over. So by discarding it, what we're doing is we're reducing the amount of the bacteria, the kind of the bad bacteria, and once we add fresh flour and water to it, the good bacteria and yeast that we want will be able to keep the batter, that's a good word, the bacteria we don't want at bay. So that's the purpose of discarding and then having a little bit of amount. And it's amazing how little it takes to re-energize flour and water. Since this is really active, I could literally take away almost all of this starter right here, and it would still ignite right back up again once I feed it. So it's pretty cool, but I won't do that now. So, okay, so that was a very long talk. What we're going to do is feed it. I've discarded, and then I'm just going to do the same thing how you would normally start your regular starter. I'm going to throw a cup in here, and about 3/4 of a cup, roughly, again. Toss that in there. I like to keep my starter a little on the drier side. And, you know, I have started from scratch probably 4 or 5 starters now for various reasons, experimenting and whatnot. And every single time I've done a starter, it's worked. So just be encouraged that if you've never done this before, it's going to work. And you just have to have a little patience, and it'll definitely pay off. And there we go. So again, that's all I do. I just give it a little bit of a mix with the spoon. Over the next few days after you've started, you'll see some little bubbles here and there. And then as you progressively feed, morning and evening, it'll start to get really active, and you'll notice it'll get really bubbly. It'll increase in volume, and you'll be good. If your container is smaller than this container, you don't have to use a cup. You could scale it down a little bit, basically going for kind of a consistency like this. You can kind of do whatever works for you. The key is, when you feed, discard almost all of it, and then replace. The final thing you want to think about with your starter is you need to realize that you're entering into a long-term relationship, and it's a fun one, but you got to keep this thing going. So there's a couple things you can do to make your life a little easier, so you're not feeding it twice a day, every single day for the rest of your life. And the easiest thing is, go ahead and just pop it in the fridge once a week. So if you're not actively baking, what I do, because I can't bake all the time if I'm working during the week or anything like that, I will go ahead and pull it out of the refrigerator like on a Thursday, and I will feed it just like what we went through, and then go ahead and just give it a feed and then put it back in the fridge. And then that's good for about a week. So that works really well for me. And then if I'm gonna bake on that Thursday night, I'll just keep it out and feed it that night, again Friday morning, And then I usually like to bake Saturdays, so then I'll feed it Friday morning, Friday afternoon, and it'll be nice and awake at that point. And then by the time I'm ready to bake on Saturday, it's all ready to go, all nice and active. Once I've used my starter for my recipe, I go ahead and feed it again, and then I go and put it back in the fridge. So that's a good way to not just keep burning through flour and, you know, have to take care of your starter like you do a pet or you know, a kid or anything like that. And you know, just remember, starters are a wonderful thing. It's something that you can share with your friends, your family. You can give them a tablespoon of starter. They can use your starter to start their own, and it's just a fun thing to share. It's a fun thing to do. It's a fun hobby. And I hope this helps you. Hope this video is informative and that you enjoy baking with sourdough. When you make a starter, you're entering into a long relationship with your starter.